Yeah.
Okay, it's setting up a meeting. All right. I think it worked this time. All right, so round 2. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first official episode of Next to the Floor.
I think it's more like episode 1.5 now because we had that technical difficulty.
The technical difficulty, yeah. So 1.5.
1.5.
But yeah, welcome to the official first episode. My name is Harrison. I'm joined by my brother from another mother, the one, the only Gary Knox Derry. And yeah, we're here chilling at our own respective houses, respecting
because social distancing
rules, and it's a lot easier to do a podcast without a mask on. So we decided let's do it from the comfort of our own comfy homes, our own comfy couches. I'm really excited for this first episode. We've got a lot to talk about.
Yeah.
So let's dive right in. So first and foremost, for everybody who may or may not be watching, Next to the Floor is kind of a, the goal of this whole adventure situation that we're taking now is to, elevate and bring light to Black voices in the dance world. In particular, for us, it's the ballroom dance world, because that's a world that we both know and love and care about deeply. If y'all have joined us for a couple of these last roundtable discussions we've been having with professionals, primarily from the Arthur Murray world, but ballroom professionals no less, talking about all of our experiences with racism, discrimination, just being Black in a predominantly white space. And our hope and goal with this podcast is to continue elevating those voices, and in all just having a good time talking about things that are important to us.
Just talking.
I wish I could say that today's episode of Next to the Floor was sponsored by someone, but it's not yet, and that's okay.
Working on it. Hey, levels, you got it. It's like levels.
Levels. It's gonna happen. It'll happen. But in the meantime,
can't get a sponsorship right out the gate.
I'm going to do some shameless plugs of a couple of, really awesome Black-owned businesses. So, I know all of my coworkers know that I really enjoy drinking tea. One of my favorite brands of tea is Yorkshire Tea. It's not a Black-owned business, but they've got the best brand of tea by far. So there's that. But I discovered recently that there is a Black-owned bee farm, apiary, as it's known, in New York.
In New York. Okay, I thought it was about the one.
No.
Because I was about to be surprised because I was like, I didn't even know that.
No, that one is not Black owned. However, they do good work. That's a
good work
place. But the place that I'm talking about in particular is called Zach and Zoe Sweet Bee Farms. Here's a little, shameless plug of a jar of honey that I bought from them. I'm gonna link their company in the website if you enjoy honey and want to get it sourced from a humane apiary. That's a bee farm. It is a entirely Black-owned company. I bought a couple of jars of honey from them. They have it in a bunch of different flavors, which is really cool. Like they have wildflower, they've got lavender, matcha, all sorts of kind of like crazy combinations. They respond to like inquiries pretty quickly. When my order arrived, I had ordered a thing of wildflower honey and a thing of lavender honey, and both of the jars said wildflower, but one of them like obviously looked like it had lavender in it. And so I was like, what's going on? And so I sent them an email and they responded within like 5 minutes.
That's good. That's that's actually very impressive for what's going on like right now,
Yeah,
especially like because you're hearing so much about black-owned businesses getting like massive amounts of orders.
massive amount of business.
There's
Yeah.
this bookstore. I'm not sure. I can't remember the name of. But Marcy's probably gonna run in here and tell me the book's name of the bookstore. But there's this bookstore that's just getting slammed with orders and orders of for books for
Mhm.
primarily Black history books, women history, women studies books, like, and they just can't fill all the orders.
Which is awesome.
It's awesome. It's great. But the thing is, the bad part about it is there's a lot of people complaining about it.
Right.
There's a lot
As
of
though
like,
like as though we can't, you know,
yeah, and these are
be
small
patient with it.
businesses we're talking about too.
Right.
Like small black-owned business, because like what do you think? Like we're gonna have a massive bookstore like Barnes and Noble? I think like a lot of like the black community has that type of out like sourcing to
Right.
provide that many orders, you know?
Right. Well, it's funny that you bring up books, because I was having a conversation with, actually one of our panelists from these last two roundtables, Evan, a couple of weeks ago when we were talking about the kind of the en vogue book, like the most trendy book that has kind of taken the bookshelves by storm, which is White Fragility,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
which, this is, not me saying like, please don't go read that book. I think it's a great book for a lot of our like white friends, coworkers, allies who are trying to like at least kind of get an understanding of their role within this whole conversation and how they can combat their own biases and like that whole idea of white fragility. But the main issue with that, and something that I've said many times on both our um, both both of our roundtables and just kind of like in general, is that the conversation about race always seems to be focused and aimed towards protecting white feelings,
Yeah.
right? And like dealing with that idea of white fragility.
White feeling. Yeah.
And I've read the book as well, and I think it's a very well written book, and I think knowing what the audience is for the book, it's done in a very productive and a very constructive way to bring more voices into the conversation in a positive light. But I think that's also part of the problem, is that it centers the conversation unwittingly,
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure, around, again, like white feelings and white fragility, which, so it's one of those weird things. And so I did a little research and came up with an entire, like a whole list of books written primarily by, actually, the entire list was actually written by, of books was written by Black women and Black women authors that deal with a lot of the conversations and topics dealt with in the book White Fragility. So I'm going to link a couple of the books. I haven't gotten around to reading them yet, because now that we're reopening the Boston studio, which is really exciting, I don't have nearly as much time as I would like to do anything, which is a bold-faced lie.
Yeah. Well,
That is a bold-faced lie. We're getting back up to working 4 days a week, and so that means I have 3 other days to literally do anything.
yeah, but you got to keep time for yourself, because like
Yeah.
on those other days, like I feel like that's what a lot of people are feeling right now. It's like on those other days where we have to do something, like we were like there's two people. We're gonna go hard because you know what, like quarantine's over, time to get back to work. And then
Quarantine.
there's the other where it's just like I'm still not transitioning from quarantine life to
right, to regular work life. I think I'm in that category where I'm still not like out of full quarantine mode, which doesn't give me an excuse not to read any of these books. I have actually read snippets of a couple of them. One of the best ones that I've like partaken in, it's called Sister Citizen, Shame, Stereotypes, and Black Women in America. I think if you have, for anyone, I'll link this in the chat as well. And when we repost this episode to all of our socials and blah, 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 I'll also include the links in the descriptions. But if you have, coworkers, friends, literally, like, if you're one of those people who have to say, I know a Black person, and that Black person happens to be a woman, or just the Black person in general, regardless, woman, man, whatever, I think this is a perfect book for you to read, because it really helps you understand the kind of social conscious and political conscious of Black people, and like why a lot of Black people think the way that they think and feel the way that they feel. And I feel like that is a large part of what's missing in conversations is that understanding and lack of empathy. And I don't want to say, like, in those kind of conversations that it's all one-sided and like, like, oh, blah, 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 white people don't want to listen and understand Black people, because I think it goes very much both ways, right? We have to understand, like, what is the overarching kind of like ethos, and what is the ethos of Black America, and like what do we as Black America stand for, which is, we all contain multitudes. So that's probably an impossible question to stand and to answer. But the same thing for like white America. What does that what is that generalized ethos? I actually, next weekend, I believe, we're gonna have our first guest. Here's a segue, but we're gonna have our first guest on the show, and he's probably one of the coolest. Okay, let me sidebar and say that we have like a mini rivalry just all the time for no reason, but it is our good friend Bjorn, who's probably one of the coolest, most worldly people that I've ever met in my entire life. Like, when I say that, like, we as people contain multitudes and like have infinite experiences upon which we can draw, like, Bjorn has infinite plus one. This man has literally done it all, and it's really fascinating. We were having a really cool conversation today about that made me think of this, because I was using, like, Black ethos, white ethos, blah, 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 big words. And we were having a really interesting conversation today about why, like, for certain races of people, we refer to, like, we use like Middle Eastern, we use Asian, we use, blah, 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 blah. We use, very clear descriptive, like, geographical terms. But then when it comes to Black people, right, we use the word Black and white. Like, what does that,
Black and white, what is that?
Right, what does that mean, and why is that a term that we use? And then it even got even deeper into kind of like we talked about almost kind of like color theory in what's it called? Sorry, my phone started talking. Color theory in, like, even talking about like the Olympics. It was really, really a cool conversation, and I'm excited to have him on and get kind of his take on all of these things.
He's probably one of the coolest people I know.
And, it pains me. It doesn't really pain me, but, just to keep up the facade, it pains me to say that out loud. But Bjorn is one of the coolest people on the entire planet, and you need to get to know this guy. He's really neat.
Next episode, we're gonna bring them on for you guys.
So what I wanted to do, one of the things that I was hoping we could do today, in episode 1 of Next to the Floor, TM, is talk a little bit about some of the questions that were asked at this last roundtable, and maybe even the one before. Get your take on it, because I know you were the kind of behind the scenes guy moderating the chat and everything, which is really exciting. And thank you for that. I know we were talking at one point about like our like episode 0, where we were just testing things. Like we all have our lane to drive in. It's understanding what your lane is. And I remember when we were putting together, the first thing you said was, I don't want to be on the panel this time around. I want to just help out. And I was like, okay, cool. So I was like, all right, great. So let's talk a little bit about this last roundtable. What were, the main topic, main theme of discussion was on representation.
Yeah.
And like, what is the importance of representation in the ballroom world, in particular for like Black, not even just the ballroom world, but the dance world for Black people, and why is having that kind of representation, like more Black people and Black bodies present and visible in the dance and ballroom world important? Why is that important to you?
Man, this past episode, it was a great topic, and it was a great episode. I got like I'm so glad I got to hear from Ron Christie, of course. We're gonna just bring up his name again because he's the best.
I just spoke very highly of Bjorn, but we're gonna say that if I were gonna like rank people on level of cool, I would say it's like Ron Christie. He's not even on my screen. Ron Christie's all the way up here.
You can't even see it?
Yeah, and everybody else.
You're biased, though. You're biased, like, against Buren, though.
Well, okay. So I'm going to let you speak here for a second, but I just want to say that Bjorn, he wasn't even working yesterday. He came into the studio to, do some clerical work, as we have to do sometimes on our days off. He came in to like make some calls, send some emails, fill out some paperwork or whatever. And he was already, we haven't seen each other outside of Zoom conference calls for the last like 4 or 5 months. And he was already trying to start stuff with me in front of our boss, Kristen. And I ended up being the bad guy in the entire situation. I'm just going to put that into the universe, that Bjorn is super mean to me all the time. But anyway,
they'll get to see for themselves anyways when he comes.
Oh my gosh, it's going to be wild. Yeah. So anyway, as you were saying, it was exciting to see from Ron Christie.
Yeah, and it was a good perspective, because I actually have never seen, before I came to the Arthur Murray community, the Arthur Murray land. I actually have not seen any studio owners in my career. Even though, I've been dancing ballroom for a long time, not as long as some people, but like I'd like to say a little bit, so throughout my whole career, I haven't ran into any studio owners. So it was really good to see that perspective about representation and how important it is in the ballroom community as well. Because I know for myself, when I look at seeing myself on the floor and like, okay, that's what I want to look at. There's this one professional that comes to mind. I've been to a lot of his workshops. He actually he was number 1 in rhythm, American rhythm. Emmanuel Pierre, and that's the only person, right? And then there's a couple other dancers in the community where I dance in Las Vegas that I saw every now and then, but it's not like they said on the round table, there's not a lot of representation out there. And it was great to see the perspective of the studio owners of, who are Black, who are trying to open up the ballroom community to be more, diverse. So
Mm-hmm.
it's great.
And one of the most poignant things that still stuck with me, and I'm so grateful to have had the opportunity to um, get to have Jamila um, on that roundtable, is, one of the
And
questions
to
that was
pursue
asked
that was
during yeah, I
you.
loved her. So one of the questions that was asked on the roundtable was, is it the responsibility of, or like is it our job as Black people to bring ballroom dancing into Black communities and like recreate kind of like a new renaissance in ballroom dancing? That wasn't the exact question, but I'm flavoring it a little bit.
Yeah.
Um, and what I love the most is that Jamila, sorry, I keep mispronouncing it. Jamila, my apologies. Was her almost immediate response was, if we don't do it, then who?
Yeah.
Right. And I think that was super poignant. And, it made me step back a little bit, because I know my original response there was that, no, it's not necessarily our sole responsibility. Do we have to do it? Yeah, absolutely. Right. But I don't know that it's necessarily our sole burden to bear. But she phrased it in such
Taking out
a
the trash,
right.
about it. You
Like, you kind of just have to do it so that other people see that it's okay and natural for it to be a thing. Like somebody has to, I think about, I'm only going to plug the Ellen DeGeneres show, which like aired in like 19, there's a whole lot of drama. We know there's a drama. So, Ellen, when her like sitcom first came out back in, God, the early 90s, right? She was basically the first, I'm going to say like open, because she wasn't really openly out at that time, but there was a lot of like allusion to it on her show that she was like an openly lesbian woman, and she kind of had to play the martyr, and almost, for what it's worth, like sacrifice her career effectively so that we could eventually get more LGBTQ representation on national television. So like, I don't want to say that, we have to martyr ourselves, like, right? I don't think we need to martyr ourselves for the cause, because there have already been hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people before us who have kind of held the torch to say like, okay, like Black people, now it's your time. It's been our time. But it's nice to hear that like, we have the power to affect that change, and should be the ones that are affecting that change without having to wait around for somebody else to do it.
Yeah.
Which, full circle, is why we are doing this, because, if we don't
Who will?
do it, who will?
Yeah.
Right. So yeah, so that was my take on it. I thought it was phenomenal. It was so exciting. My favorite thing about it was being able to see the and again, I forget, I think I was talking with my dance partner, our coworker Kat, about this, is, the importance of representation in ballroom dancing was kind of like shown just in that roundtable alone, when you have somebody who is pretty much like brand new to not necessarily the ballroom and social dancing world, but to the ballroom world as like a profession, such as our panelist Autumn. And then you have all of these other Black people who are in very different stages of their careers within the ballroom world.
Yeah.
To see her kind of, that there was a moment, if you watch the video, where you can see there is like a literal weight that is lifted off of her. Like you can see it in her, like her body language. She just kind of like lifts. And it was so nice to see that, like that having this representation of like, you know, there are successful Black women in this industry. There are successful Black men in this industry. There might not be a lot of them, but they are there and they exist, and we will like go to the moon and back to help you get to where you need to be.
Do you think our
But
representation is suppressed
huh?
in our community? Do you think our representation is suppressed? The little
Um,
that we have.
well, you know, I don't know if it's necessarily suppressed. Like I don't know that there are people who are saying like are trying to keep it like hush hush. I just think it's very difficult, especially I think about it more from like a kind of like an instructor perspective. You know, when you're not a franchisee and you have that huge access, like um, your studio is a very kind of, it's a very isolated bubble,
Mm-hmm.
right? And you know, I think about our studio, like yeah, we see the other studios around us, but how often do we actually get to interact with the other studios? So you know, if you're the only Black instructor at a studio in Hawaii,
Yeah.
right, that can feel like a very isolating thing. So I think just kind of the nature of, and this is the case for a lot of businesses and a lot of things in the world, um, the just kind of the nature of how the business and society works, right? It is very easy to feel like you are alone in the world and not have necessarily that network of people who are like you. It's like going to another country and being able to speak the other language, and then, you know, not knowing if there's another person who
Speaks that
speaks your
language. And
native tongue.
find when you finally found somebody that speaks that language, it's just
Right.
ah,
Right. And
oh hey, you know,
right. It's like, you
grab a
know,
drink and speak some English,
right.
Spanish.
It's a very refreshing thing. You know, I think about there was when I was younger, we went to, you know, we did kind of a little tour. I went on like a people to people student ambassador tour to a couple of different countries in France. It was really fun, had a great time. But I kept thinking about how fortunate I was to, you know, I was able at that point to speak French. I'd been studying French for a very long time. And so, you know, I was able to communicate with, while we were going through French, we were there, or through French, listen to me, while we were going through France, we were there for about a week. And so I was able to like communicate with people pretty effortlessly and have a good time. And of course I was with a group of American teenagers, you know, we're all 13, 14, 15 years old. So it's like, you know, I'm not short of opportunity to have conversations with people in English, but I know like at the end of the day, after spending an entire day speaking English, speaking completely, or speaking French, speaking a completely different language, it was so nice to be able to come back to something that you're familiar with. And so, you know, I think one of the important things that we have to do, and why, again, why a podcast like this or a network like this is so important, is that it allows us as Black people to find our community within a grander community that already is fairly accepting of us as people, that has its own issues. But you know, it's nice to know that we are not alone in that journey, and that there are other people who have taken our journey and taken the steps in our journey and have been successful with it.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, so there's some tea for you.
There's some tea for you.
Yeah, speaking of this last roundtable, there was
As
a
you pull
question.
out the tea, literally.
This is, I think this is my husband's mug. Shocker! I don't know if anybody out there could tell. Yes, I am married, and I do have a husband. He's not here at the moment; he's at work. But this is his mug. You can't sit with us. We have this thing about Mean Girls. One of the greatest movies ever written. It defined our generation, I like to think. Seen it more times than necessary. Shameless plug for Mean Girls.
Days we wear pink.
Well, when the day we got married, I'll get to my original. This is going to be the theme of the podcast, so everybody knows, is we're going to start talking about one thing, and then it's instantly going to shift gears to something completely different. When we got married, we were planning on having a wedding and blah, 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 but then, I can't say anything about this. Oh, just kidding. I don't want to give up any secrets. Cool. That could have been bad.
You just caught yourself
I caught myself in a huge situation. I caught myself in a huge situation. Oh my gosh, it's going to be on the internet. It's okay. I think we'll be fine. I will share those details when he tells me I can share those details. Anyway, moral of the story, blah, 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 October 3rd. It was a Wednesday. And we wore
pink.
But so circling back to the round table that was happening. Whoa, that was almost a disaster. Woo, he was going to be so mad at me. So there were a couple of questions that were asked by the audience that we didn't actually get to answer. And
questions.
I'm gonna kind of throw one of the questions out there into the universe, and we can talk about it. And I know, just for like our viewers at home, I will let you know that neither Gary or myself are experts in all things Black related.
Yeah, I'm not.
We are two Black men who have varying experiences with our race and color, and we're just hoping to be voices for people. So if any of this doesn't sit well with you,
get over it.
I think a small part of me is like, well, get over it. You've got our details here on Next to the Floor. You just send us a message. We'll gladly talk to you more about it. But we're also not here to necessarily answer all of the questions. We're just here to talk about it. And if we don't come up with a resolution, that's totally fine. So here's one of the questions that actually is really, really smart. And, we're planning on doing another roundtable at the end of August, which is scary to believe that we're already there. And so hopefully we'll be able to look at and answer some of these questions there as well. But they were all good questions, but one of the main questions, and a certain somebody whom I love and you love asked this question, but how do we envision the role of individual dance studios? I know the original question was how do you envision the role of Arthur Murray / individual dance studios in community outreach? I kind of want to pose this as, how do we envision the individual studios?
It doesn't even, I wouldn't even start it there. It doesn't even have to be the individual studios, where's the sense of community in that?
Right.
Why not make it a bigger thing than that?
Right.
For example, just think about community outreach, Autumn had the Swing for Black Lives, right? That was just a simple dance, right? But that was still community outreach.
Right.
No, I think we need to look at what type of programs that we can make and what type of problems we're trying to attack.
Right.
Right.
And
from there, decide the size. I feel on my, when I think about community outreach and creating programs with dance and ballroom, I don't think with just this one studio,
Right.
I might think about the district or the area, or
right.
Exactly, especially if you're in a chain, a franchise,
right?
So that's something right there. Why leave it at just a studio?
Right.
But go ahead. I know you have some words for this one too.
Well, no, I agree with you. I think there's something to be said about utilizing the greater power of especially for an organization like the one that we work for, which is a multinational company.
Cool. Yeah.
There's something to be said about leveraging that weight and power. Um, but then also at the same time, there's a lot to be said and done kind of on the local level, because every studio is in a very different spot. And so I want to speak to this not necessarily in the like Black Lives Matter perspective, but just in the from a community perspective. How do you get your community more involved in your in dance life, right? And I think part of it is understanding the needs of your community. Like, what does your community need? So like when I say this, I look at the makeup of Boston, not necessarily the Boston studio, but like Boston as a city and Boston as a whole, right? We have a huge Black and brown population, like
Yep.
huge, humongous. And for an incredibly wealthy, well-educated neck of the woods, right? Boston also has, in Massachusetts, well, mostly Boston has one of the lowest kind of like standardized testing scores. At least Boston Public has one of the lowest like standardized testing scores, and has one of the most, I think, one of the kind of lowest graduation rates of like school districts within the Northeast. And I think there's something you like as a studio, what we need to do is look into our community and look to see where there are issues and what things need to be addressed. So in this case, like education needs to be addressed, and what can we do as a dance community to enrich that? Can we create a ballroom dance program for like the Boston public school system that like can be used as an elective that's going to teach students about social literacy, self-esteem, self-care, problem solving, body language, nonverbal communication, all the things that we tout that ballroom dancing does for the human, right? How can we create that for our individual communities? And I kind of make that delineation between like the Black Lives Matter movement, which is very important. But I think it's also very important to realize that as much as this is a global issue, that every area, every neck of the woods, every little community experiences that very differently. So you look at like a city like a suburb of like Houston, Texas, or we'll say like Sugar Land, which is, a probably upwards of like 95, 96, 97% white community. Right? So like the issues that we're facing and dealing with here in Boston are obviously not the same issues that they're going to be dealing with out there in, middle of nowhere, Texas. Yeah. And so I think it's up to the individual studio or individual person to assess what is it that their community needs and be able to do something about that, but then also incorporate the grander scope, right? And leverage what the grander scope has to push forward that agenda. Because it's a grassroots thing.
It is. Yeah. And not every place is the same too.
Of course.
And I feel like honestly, to tackle something like that, like have it be individual, but on a grander scale, I think the main problem that has like why it necessarily we haven't seen programs like this in the ballroom community. I mean, there's actually programs out there. There's this one program called I forgot the name, but they go out. They're instructors that go out to schools and they dance with the kids. They take them outside like for PE
Right.
and teach them the little salsa rueda. I forgot what program it is.
Well, that was the entire plot of, um, oh gosh, my take away my ballroom dance card. The one movie with Antonio Banderas.
Antonio Banderas.
Was it Dance with Me?
Dance with me.
No.
No.
Uh, Hold on.
You're gonna look at it.
We're
We
in
need
a,
people in the
we
background.
are,
People in the
yeah, we are
background
in an
fact
information.
checking us and like sending us like what we're thinking about.
Oh, it was Take the Lead.
Take the lead. Okay.
Yes, it was Take the Lead. And that was basically the true, it's a true story, wherein, God, the teacher, American, blah, 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 Pierre Delane, that's who it was. Pierre Delane, basically went into an inner city school, I believe in New York City. It was a very kind of like stand and deliver sort of like plot line where, you know, you've got the teacher who goes into this inner city school and gets the class of like super troubled youth, and teaches them, you know, how to dance, and then they all of a sudden they all become like better people, and then they all graduate and blah, blah. And this is a true story, and I think there's merit to that. But fun fact, Pierre Delane actually was I believe was an Arthur Murray trained ballroom dancer.
Oh, look at that.
I believe. I might be lying.
Mm.
You can fact check about that.
Somebody fact check us.
Yeah, but
we need more of
yeah.
that.
So like I mean,
it's
it's not an unprecedented thing, right? It's been a thing that has happened. It's was made a movie, like they made a movie about it.
Yeah.
But I think, yeah, I think there are things that both we as like individual instructors, individual studios can do to influence greater change within kind of the larger schema of things. But it starts largely by looking at your community, right?
Yeah, yeah. We just have to do it though.
Yeah, and I think that's the scariest thing, is pulling that trigger, right? Because, you know, you're always kind of plagued with that fear of, what if it doesn't work? What if it goes wrong? Right?
Mm-hmm.
That, you know, in doing this, that was the scariest thing for me. I was scared out of my mind.
Let's give them like creation stories real quick. Not creation stories, but how this all started.
Well,
like we haven't really talked about ourselves either. like because I'm pretty sure there's people watching that maybe haven't seen the
haven't seen the roundtables. Yeah, so that's a good segue. So let's talk a little bit about, you know, Next to the Floor, how it came about, and, you know, who we are. So let's talk about Next to the Floor to begin.
Yeah.
So
we said a little bit at that in the beginning, but
yeah. So, you know, the whole mission of this, and the reason why this whole thing started was, you know, we're in the middle of quarantine. George Floyd dies. We all, as an entire nation, watch his murder live on TV. For a lot of Black people, this is not the first time we've seen something like this happen. And for pretty much most of America, this is not the first time we've seen something like this happen and have experienced this. But this is the first time that all of America, because we were in quarantine and nobody was doing anything, that we had to actually sit down and pay attention to the fact that it was actually happening. You know, there was nothing there that was distracting us. And from there, the Black Lives Matter movement showed up again. And it's never really left, but its voice became so much louder because now we have the voices of, again, now people who don't have anything else to do and nothing else to distract them from the injustices that people are facing, and are actually like now starting to hear us and listen to us when we're saying like, stop killing us. And so I, you know, went on a few days of like Facebook tirades and blah, blah, as, you know, as we're wont to do. We all can become keyboard warriors every so often. And you know, our boss and a couple of the other franchisees that I'm friends with, you know, after seeing a bunch of my Facebook posts and stuff like that, messaged me and said like, hey, you know, what can we do? What is it that like, not necessarily like, what can I, not necessarily like, what can we as in like the person do, but what can we as a, like as a business, as a community do to support our Black instructors, our Black franchisees, our Black students who are all experiencing, as you know, Drew has said many times, like experiencing PTSD again for the umpteenth time, watching somebody who looks like us be murdered right there. And so, you know, the first slew and the first like line of things was, you know, businesses and Arthur Murray, our studios, were starting to put out like messages of support on all of their social medias, which I think was a very important and a very, very important thing for a lot of these studios to do, was to like say, no, this is important to us, that, you know, we have Black students, Black professionals, Black friends, Black family members who walk through and grace our halls and our dance floors on a daily basis. There are Black people and brown people who created the things that we do, created these dances, created the music that we listen to, and we have to show them that we care. Mm-hmm. And so we got a lot of those messages of support out there, which was, I think, a huge first step, because I think far too often the decision to voice support for something like that is seen as political.
Yeah.
Which is
I know. I was like, I'm about to start right now,
which boggles my mind. Which, you know, like, it doesn't surprise me that, you know, my existence, our existence as Black people, is a political, like, my right to exist isn't a political discussion. Shouldn't be a political discussion. It's just a fact. I deserve to live and feel safe, right? And so that's kind of where that whole thing began. And then I was really pushing for, you know, like organizations at the top level. So like Arthur Murray International, like NDCA, all of these other, like at the very top of the spectrum, they need to, like, I was pushing for them to come out and say something. So I got together with a bunch of other professionals, like via Facebook chat, was talking to, you know, our boss, our like area directors, some other area directors around the company were in touch with them. And we were all pushing for like a statement from like the higher ups, because that's even more important for like, for me, that like, yeah, I can work for this one individual studio, but this one individual studio is part of a larger conglomeration, basically. And if the larger conglomeration doesn't approve of this message and doesn't agree that, you know, like Black lives, my life, matter, the lives of their Black coaches, professionals, franchisees, students matter, like if they can't come out and say something about that, then like, why am I even bothering? And so, and again, like it frustrated me to no end that the decision to almost not do it was because they didn't want to pick a side. And even just saying that, that's a very problematic thing. So eventually they did, and I'm very grateful.
Hold on, I'm gonna stop you there. That's why I still have some friends that haven't, like, that I have like close friends. I like still have. We talked about this earlier, but I still have close friends that still haven't talked to me like since
because they don't want to pick a side. But like
what's like,
there are no sides. Like the side of acknowledging me as a human being.
Yeah.
or what? What's the alternative?
But we don't want to get no, it's just we don't want to get
It's not my, like,
no,
I
because they
get
don't want
my
it, because
life.
other people see them getting, they don't want other people see them getting political because they have their own friends, their own relationships, and stuff like that who are by far racist.
And so what I appreciate is the studios that were active in like coming out and saying something like bold, like, we are here to say that Black Lives Matter. That was the most important thing to me, because it says that, you know, you don't care about the naysayers. Like,
Yeah.
you might have, you might, and this is the important thing to me, is that like you might have students, staff, whatever, who don't agree with that. And yet you're going to allow them to patronize your business, knowing full well that they don't think that I, who might work with them one day, don't matter as a person. So, you know, I think it was a very important thing, because it shows to me as a individual, and this is an important thing for business owners, that millennials and Gen Z, this is a study that was done, millennials and Gen Z, our age demographic, are 40% more likely to patronize a business if we know that the business that we are patronizing has values similar to ours.
Yeah.
We are 40% more likely to patronize a business if their values align with our own. You know, so if I know a business is like, if I see a business, as soon as I see a business say all lives matter, I'm like, nope, shut it down. Don't care. You do not get my money. Bye. Thanks for having me. It's been a good day. But you know, so that was kind of the start of everything. And then, you know, they put out a statement, which I think was the bar was the bar, they hit the bar, and the bar was like on the ground. And that's just like my opinion. There's a lot more that could have been said, but you know, like, a statement is a statement. And so like, I'll take what I'm given. You know, this is one of those moments where, unfortunately, like, as much as I can't be a beggar, like, beggars can't be choosers, and I expect more, I also know, like, it's one of those, you have to know the audience and know that that was probably, like, the statement that we got was probably as good as we're going to get, and that's fine.
For the audience that we draw, but
Yeah.
as borrowed.
And that's right. And that's an okay thing. You know, sometimes you got to accept a win when you take the W, when you get the W.
Yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm. And so from there, you know, we've been talking about trying to put together a kind of like a task force within the organization to deal with situations like this, to deal with racism, to deal with discrimination, to deal with kind of all of these super big nuanced issues that plague every single industry. And it's important to have people who are willing and able to have the conversations to combat it and make sure that it doesn't happen. And so then from there, I was like, okay, well, if we're going to do this, we need kind of a starting point. And so let me just organize something and get together a bunch of Black professionals that I'm familiar with, and, get their take on, their experiences with racism, discrimination, blah, 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 in the ballroom world. And maybe that can be the start of the conversation, so that when we do create this task force and blah, 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 that we know where to go. We know what our baseline is.
Yeah.
Right. So that way we're not just kind of shooting blanks in the dark, that we at least have a target for what we're doing. And that eventually evolved into what we have now, which is Next to the Floor, which is really exciting.
Boom.
So thanks for letting me go on to that diatribe.
You're good. No, you're good. I cut you off there too. I got a little heated.
No, that's okay. It's important that the people know why we are here.
Yeah.
But I hate to say it, y'all, but we're coming up to the end of episode 1 of Take the Floor. Nope, Next to the Floor.
Next,
Harrison, get the name of your podcast right. Ooh, wow, we're winning today. You know what they say? You have to lose big to win big.
Yeah.
What are we doing? Losing big.
Hey, but sometimes you just have to play the game, you know?
You got to play the game. And so that's what we're doing. So, I know, again, thank you to our sponsors that we don't have yet. But if we didn't have sponsors, this is where we would say thank you to our sponsors, so-and-so and so-and-so. Sponsor today. They're actually not sponsoring us. This is not a sponsored video, but I'm going to plug Zach and Zoe Sweet Bee Farms, based out of New York. I think they're based out of New York City, or like New York City adjacent.
New York City.
Yeah, New York City.
I'm gonna have to go pick up some honey there because
they have a brick and mortar store in Manhattan.
Okay.
But check out Zach and Zoe Sweet Bee Farms. I linked them in the chat. They've got some great stuff. The kids on there, or the 2 kids on their like homepage, that is Zach and Zoe. Those are the kids that the company is named after. They're adorable. Really great product. Goes really great with a nice glass of Yorkshire tea.
Nice. I'm gonna have to go try me some of that tea because I'm in New York a lot and
yeah,
it's allergy season, so I don't like taking allergy medicine. So I usually go for natural
tea's the best way.
Stuff like that.
This particular episode of the podcast is also brought to you not through funding, but just, I'm going to say it's brought to you by the book Sister Citizen, Shame, Stereotypes, and Black Women in America. Pick up a copy of that today. I also linked that. It's an Amazon link. And you know how I feel about our corporate overlords, and that, we can probably source all of our goods from better places. Seek out your local books, like small business bookseller, please, when you're looking for these things. If they don't have it on stock, I'm sure they can order it for you. It's a phenomenal book. I just linked the Amazon one there because that was
the first time that I can find. Amazon, they busy anyways. Like,
yeah,
Jeff Bezos, he's almost a trillionaire, so you good. Buy it from your local
for realsies
business.
But yeah, thank you all so much for watching episode 1 of Next to the Floor. This video will be available on YouTube soonly. Check out some of our other videos, and by some of our other videos, that is our first roundtable, which happened back at the end of June. Our second roundtable, around race and ballroom, ballroom dance and race, a roundtable discussion, part 2, Electric Boogaloo, which happened literally last weekend.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Time's going by so fast. I feel like
it's been so fast, and yet this has felt like an incredibly long week.
Same time. It's funny how time works like that.
Yeah, I know. It was literally this time last week that we were finishing up the roundtable. And
backwards.
I know. And and so so check out those videos. Make sure you invite everyone to like the Next to the Floor page on Facebook. It is facebook.com/ next to, because there's 1-2 of us, Next to the Floor. Check us out on Facebook. Wear a mask, wash your hands, be a good person. And because remember, it costs you $0 to be a good person. And with that, have a fab weekend. Thank y'all for being here.